All right, I'd like to call the public hearing meeting to order at 7 o'clock. All council members are present, and the mayor. And at this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to our solicitor, Mr. Engelhocker.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. We're going to have a hearing tonight pursuant to the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code on a proposed amendment to the borough's zoning ordinance. And the proposed amendment is what we call a map amendment, meaning that at the moment, the only thing that is being changed is the boundary line between the conservation zoning district and the medium residential zoning district. And the entire zoning change involves only about 1.6 acres of land. So the way we do this is the municipality's planning code requires that we have what is called a hearing. Nobody is sworn, testimony is not taken. It's a hearing for public comment. So we'll go through the process. We'll have some documents that are marked as exhibits to show that the municipality complied with all of the procedural requirements for doing a zoning amendment. We'll run through the amendment real quick and what it is, what the purpose of it is, and then we'll open it up. And I see that Mr. Buba is here on behalf of the applicant. We'll open it up to questions by council, and then we'll go around the room, and anybody who wants to speak is entitled to raise their hand, come up to the podium, state their name and address, and to make a comment, or if you'd like to ask a question and we can answer it, we would be happy to do so. Also, Mr. Buba may want to respond to some questions that anybody in the audience has as well. So what we have tonight is, as I indicated, it's a change to the zoning map. The zoning map draws boundaries between zoning districts. And what you can do within each zoning district, and within that boundary, you go look to the zoning ordinance, and the zoning ordinance tells you what you can, and in some instances cannot do within a district. The change that we're going to talk about tonight, and the ordinance is known as ordinance number 1158. What we're going to talk about tonight is a requested change on a parcel. It's a property owned by Rodale, and it's east of Pennsylvania Avenue, and it's located where Arch and Tillman Streets intersect. The total size of the property is about 9.85 acres. At present, 1.6 acres of that property is located in the Conservation Residential Zoning District. The rest of the property, which is about 8.2 acres, is located in the Medium Residential Zoning District. What is ultimately proposed, and this will be handled down the line, won't handle tonight, we'll talk about the process and what the process will go through for land development, but what is proposed that I've last seen is a 49-unit townhouse development. Now, townhouses are permitted in the medium residential zoning district, which is that roughly 8.2 acres of land that form part of this parcel. Townhomes are not permitted in the conservation residential, which is the remaining 1.6 acres of that parcel. So what's happening essentially is that the owner of the property, or the owner and the applicant with respect to a possible land development, are asking that zoning boundary be moved a short distance to add the rest of the parcel into the medium residential district. From what I can see on the sketch plan that's been submitted, this is a single parcel, but it's what we call split zoned, meaning that part of the parcel is in one district and the other part of the parcel is in another district. So it's a relatively limited request to move the zoning boundary a short distance to bring the entire parcel into the medium residential district. Now, assuming that council tonight takes action on the amendment, and assuming, just for the sake of argument, that the amendment is approved, what happens is if the whole parcel is going to be developed as townhouse development, the plan still must go to the zoning hearing board, because a townhouse development in the medium residential zoning district is what's called a special exception. And as a special exception, the townhouse development has to meet certain criteria that are established in the zoning ordinance. So this is not the end of the process. Once the special exception is approved, if it's approved by the zoning hearing board, then the townhouse development comes before the planning commission to review the development aspects of the plan, such as traffic, stormwater, other environmental issues, zoning issues like setbacks and building numbers and the size of the lot, those types of things. The planning commission will review, and then ultimately, based on a planning commission recommendation, it will come back to borough council for some form of final action. So what we're doing tonight, so that everybody understands, is all we're focusing on is the rezoning of a very small piece of land, 1.6 acres. We're not getting into development issues tonight. Development issues will be down the road to some degree in front of the zoning hearing board, and that will be advertised when that hearing takes place. And then most of the development issues in front of the planning commission, which meets here in council chambers on Thursday nights. I think it's the second or third Thursday of the month, I don't recall. But the planning commission schedule is advertised, and people are able to come to the planning commission meetings if you have an interest in the property, and you can hear what's going on, and you can have input. So there will be a number of opportunities. So when we open the floor up tonight to comments, please keep in mind that we're here for just a real narrow issue, and that's just the rezoning. Development issues will be before other bodies of the borough down the road. And if you ask a question, I may interrupt you and say that's something that will be decided later. Of course, I mean, certainly we want to give everybody a chance to speak. So this is what's going to happen tonight, and these are the implications for tonight. So what I'm going to do real quick, because it's the municipality's obligation to advertise these things correctly, we're going to place on the record a number of exhibits that show that we complied with all of the advertising requirements. I'll identify those exhibits in the event that down the road there's any issue or there's any question. The first exhibit will be Exhibit A, which will be the draft ordinance. The second exhibit is going to be the advertising packet, which includes the public notice and all the newspaper advertising requirements. Exhibit C is going to be a package of letters. Everybody we send notice to. We send notice to, we filed the ordinance with the Lehigh County Department of Law. We send a notice to Rodale Press since it's the owner and it's its property that's the subject of the amendment. We send notice to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, which oversees land development within Lehigh County and Northampton County. And then we've also sent it to the borough's planning commission. Those would be the bodies that conduct official reviews. We also send the notice, and this is marked as Exhibit D, to a number of neighboring municipalities with whom the borough generally shares a comprehensive plan, and those would be to the Borough of Macungie, Borough of Albertus, Lower Macungie Township, Upper Milford Township, and to Lower Milford Township. And when we send these letters out, we oftentimes get responses, and Exhibit D will be the Southwest Comprehensive Plan Group. Exhibit E is the response by Lower Macungie Township. Exhibit F is the response by Upper Milford Township. And the Exhibit G is the response by the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. So those are all the documents that we have that support the technical aspects for proceeding with an advertisement. And now at this point, what we would do is open up the proceeding to any questions that members of council might have with respect to the ordinance. And Joe, I don't know if you want to make a presentation at all.
If I could, I think some of our exhibits might help the neighbors. Is that okay?
Sure, you can open them up on the table since we don't have that easel you were looking for.
And I'm actually going to stand here so I don't have my back to everyone. Just first, let me clarify a few things. My name is Joe Buba from Fitzpatrick, Wentz & Buba on behalf of the applicant. And actually, the closing has occurred, so W2B2 LLC is now the actual owner. and Bill Wall, an individual from Emmaus, is the principal. I usually don't speak so loud.
Yeah, but it goes into the recording.
So, and let me clarify one other point. The applicant is seeking to amend the Emmaus zoning map to change 1.6 acres of conservation residential to medium-density residential. Mr. Finkelhocker, the current zone, which I'll show in Exhibit 1, is actually currently 2.8 acres is in the CR.
Okay.
We're going to we're seeking to convert 1.6 of that to the RM, which would still leave 1.2 acres of the total 8.5 or 9 as conservation residential. And I've been doing this a while, and I've been on both sides of this, and I realize whenever an advertisement goes out and it says we're getting rid of a conservation district or we're amending open space, it's a sensitive issue. I understand that. I would just ask you to bear with me, because I think what you'll find as we go through this process is, with working with the borough, that this can be a win-win situation when we talk about the current proposed zoning and what the developer is trying to do. I read the notices that were sent out by some of the neighbors. Very well done, by the way. And first, let me tell you what this proposal is not meant to do, both tonight and as we move forward. We're not trying to seek to increase density one iota. We're not trying to seek increasing the number of units one iota. And we're not seeking to increase traffic one iota from the current zoning to the proposed zoning. I think that'll be clear as we proceed. What we are trying to do is make the townhouse development aesthetically pleasing on larger lots. We're trying to increase open space and allow residents of Emmaus to actually have access to that open space. And this is an important point. Although 2.8 acres of this land is zoned conservation residential, the public does not have access to it. So what does it really mean? It doesn't give anyone the benefit. The plans that we're proposing is going to be to actually increase the open space, dedicate that open space to the township, to the borough, and to allow residents to use that. And we'll show you that on some of the plans. I've marked the sketch applicants number 1, and I'll hand out a few of those, and I'll do the neighbors one. But I also have a large one that I can show everyone. I'm sorry.
I can share with him.
Okay.
Yeah. We're shared, but we're
He bathed today. It's not in there.
We looked in there.
I appreciate
I
that.
thought we had one too. I mean, you can look. Maybe I missed it. It's a real skinny one, right?
He doesn't bathe.
I'll put one on each side.
Just hold it. Okay, so let's make sure this is
This property, as Mr. Dickelhocker said, is the intersection of Tillman Street and, as you can see, it still says Rodell Crest. But this area in the back, the dark triangle right now, is zoned CR. You can see what we're trying to do, which is basically split up that triangle and move the northern part into the RM district, still leaving a 1.2 strip along the back as conservation residential. And we'll show you how that equates into a plan in a second. So we're not getting rid of all CR. We're getting rid of about half of it by this amendment.
this other half goes back up here.
I need to see the trail.
Yeah, that's when we start developing. I'm sure you've done the map over here.
Next, I'm going to show you applicants number 2. Applicants number 2 shows what would happen if a developer attempted to develop this parcel with the current zoning. That is, no change being required.
Yes. Conservation zone. That's from the comprehensive plan.
Remember, most of this is RM to start with. In addition, there's uses that are permitted in the CR, single-family homes. So this large drawing, again, I always put it with South Mountain in the back, at the top. If we develop the parcel right now, you could put in 46 townhomes, and you could put in 4 single-family lots. And I will tell you that even though I have 46 townhomes on this, they're showed as 24 feet wide. You can go as narrow as 18 feet wide, which you'll see in a minute. So we did not squeeze every unit in here, but you will see there are 50 units, and the traffic that would be associated with 50 units could be built right now without a zoning amendment. Most importantly, look at the green space and the orange trails that are on this right now. And I'll try to bring that home to roost in a second. Next, I will show you applicants number 3. Applicants number 3 is Hal W2B2 wishes to develop this tract. So once again, orienting ourselves in the exact same way. So South Mountain at the top. Notice now, first, we have 49 units in this versus 50. Secondly, you will see extensive green space along the entire perimeter, including the conservation area that could not be touched previously at the top of the page. And if we did this by comparison, which I'll now read for you, I won't mark this as an exhibit because it's just a summary of the other charts. Sorry, I don't have many of these. Thank you. I'll hand this to you after I read it. So under the current zoning, total acreage, 9.85. Under proposed zoning, current acreage, obviously 9.85. Under the current zoning, RM acreage, 7.27. These are estimates, by the way. These aren't surveyed. The RM acreage under the proposed would increase to 8.65. The CR acreage under current is 2.58. And under the proposed zoning, it would be reduced to 1.20. Total number of units under current, 50. And let me add an asterisk there. The asterisk is, as I said, we can go to 18 feet wide. These show 24 feet wide. You also can have apartments by special exception in this exact same zone. We are not proposing apartments, and I can tell you that Rodale was negotiating with an apartment purchaser when we acquired the property. This is the important part. recreational space under the current zoning, when a developer develops a project under Emmaus's well-written ordinance, you need to develop walking trails and those type of things. However, you do not need to dedicate them to the public. So the recreational space in the current example would be 55,800 square feet and a walking path of 1,440 lineal feet. And as I said, that would be limited to use by the development. In our proposal, we're increasing the recreational space to 81,361 square feet, and we're increasing the walking path to 2,875 lineal feet. Most importantly, through an easement program that Mr. Dinkelhocker is aware of, there's a way of dedicating land through an easement to a municipality so that citizens, residents of Emmaus can use that. The beauty of that is, if you look on applicant's number 3, a large portion of our trails and open space abut the park. And we would just connect those two if, in fact, that's what the township wanted us to do. So it would expand open space and park space. I just have a few more. I know there's always concerns about density. Applicant's number 4 is a Google map showing the current density, and the track that we're talking about is the large one with nothing on it. And I'll hand this to you so you can see that. The interesting part about that is this area is already very significantly dense with housing units. All of those red dots beneath it are in fact housing units. And I'll hand this up as I mark it. Applicant's number 5 is a tax assessment map showing the same type of density by the red dots. Now, to give you some idea, again, this is not land development, it's not special exception. But to give you some idea of why we want larger lots, why we want to use the area that slopes back towards the mountain, I have applicants number 6 and applicants number 7 are pictures of townhomes that related parties have built. The 6 is in Emmaus up against South Mountain. 7 is in Allentown against South Mountain. They are larger towns. There are
Smaller area.
sorry.
And the only recreation is that.
They're larger towns. They're landscape. We would, in this instance, put limitations on above-ground pools, the type of color schemes. They'd be like Williamsburg type of colors. No trailers, no truck parking, all of those things that would make this aesthetically pleasing. But from a financial perspective, you need to have a price point with lots that are large enough, and that's why we don't want to squeeze them into the current RM. We'd like a little bit more space. The second ones are the Allentown South Mountain. You'll see they all have stone veneer facade. And they are the type of units that we'd like to build. So, in conclusion, and I'll answer any questions you have, but as Mr. Dinkelhocker said, this is a split lot. We did not seek to get zoning relief just based upon the split lot. We prefer to do it this way with an amendment. We wanted to show that we weren't trying to increase density that we are trying to do very significant, nicely done townhomes, and no increase in density, no increase in traffic, because remember, you can have more units, and you can even have apartments on this same lot, which I believe has a 200-foot building length, which is permitted, and 3 stories. So you could have a series of those, which is why an apartment user was looking at that. So with that said, I'll put the microphone down and answer either council or residents' questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. What we do is we open it up first to any questions or comments by council, and then we'll turn to the folks out in the audience. So, Brent, anybody?
Councilman Brown?
Yes, a few questions and a concern. Will the developer look to build the 4 single-family development homes if they do not get approved? Will the developer look to build the 4 single-family development or single-family dwelling homes if they do not get approved tonight?
I expect so.
They still would build those extra 4?
Yes.
Okay. The concern I have is access to this area for residents and public safety. There's only one way in and out, and that's DeLong Avenue. So is there any more?
There's two, Tillman and...
But DeLong Avenue is the only way in and out, is your main corridor.
Arch Street.
Okay, so let me clarify. Sorry. If you're coming off of Pennsylvania Avenue and you're coming west, and then you make a left onto DeLong, the only way that you're going to get into that development, again, the only access to that development and to Arch and Tillman is DeLong Avenue. You only have one access in. So my concern is there another access point going to be down the road, future, to extend Tillman Street to 12th Street? I didn't know if there's any plans. Okay. And then the last one is, I do not have the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission recommendation letter. What does it recommend?
It is in your
I just have Lower Mac and Upper Milford.
oh, what's the other one you wanted to know?
Lower McCungie and Upper Milford letters of recommendation.
They're in your...
That in my iPad, yeah. I do not have Lehigh Valley Planning Commission.
Yeah, LVPC, I think, just their review letter indicated inconsistency with the comprehensive plan simply because of the conservation, the fact that 1.5 acres of this were in the conservation zone. That was really the only comment.
Thank you.
There was no submission of any of these drawings to LVPC.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
And can you again state the amount of open space that would be between the 2 plans? I think I'm reading it correctly here.
The recreational space. Now, I have not included in open space the detention ponds.
Mhm.
So the recreational space is 55,800 under current and 81,361 under the proposed.
Okay.
And the trail doubles. The length of the trail doubles, and that's before I've made a connection point to the playground.
And the other major difference that I see is you would not be allowing the public to use it under the current zoning, correct?
Correct.
Versus the proposed.
That's right.
Okay. And is there a reason why the public would not be allowed to use it?
We need to maximize the area. We have no idea what the stormwater's going to look like. We know under the other model, there's certainly areas here that are not going to be used in any way for detention. So for the liability issue, we know we can create recreational trails outside of the detention basins or possibly even infiltration areas.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I don't remember the trail that's being built around the facility that will be open to the public. Is that a half mile or a mile? I don't remember the length of it.
2875.
How many lineal feet are there in a mile? Anybody know?
5,280.
So a half mile then.
It's a little over half a mile.
Half mile. Okay.
And would the borough be responsible eventually for this walking path?
Yeah, there's different ways you can do it. I think the model easement has us transferring we can do the maintenance, but if you're the easement holder, you get the immunity under the act, which is the ideal way, because it's hard to allow neighbors onto our property because you have releases and all of those things. So, I mean, Mr. Dicklocker and I can work that out. We've just done one on the waterfront where the development's being built, where they will have access to all of the streets, the public, not just people who are working on the waterfront, and you can do that through an easement so that you get the immunity. But if it's necessary for us to maintain, we would add it to our homeowners association fees. So the only homeowners association fees would be for maintenance of the stormwater and the trail, and it would be a relatively minor fee, but that's what we would want to do. So we maintain that you get the immunity and the use.
Anybody else from council? Councilman
So-
Dufresne?
On Exhibit 2 here, or number 2 here that you handed out, so if the developer did nothing else and just wanted to live with everything as it is, they could build exactly number 2 right now we couldn't do anything about it, correct?
Subject to special.
Yeah, you would need a special exception approval because in the RM district, it would still go before the zoning hearing board on the townhouse issue. And so, that mean we call that exhibit a by right plan, meaning that there would, other than the special exception approval, there would be no other relief necessary to build that plan. There might be some waivers or some other adjustments that would occur, but the representation here that it's essentially that would be a plan that would be permitted by our current zoning, assuming a special exception approval, which is typically something that is granted by the zoning hearing board, especially when you meet all of the criteria for the special exception. It becomes a permitted use, essentially.
Again, I'll add, I know I'm being repetitive, but if it was not this developer, there are many 18-foot wide townhouses which are permitted, and there are many of those in the borough right now. These are shown as 24. None of our towns actually are 24. The ones on those drawings are 25 or 28.
And your other difference that I see is the total units in the current zoning could be as many as 50, where the proposed is 49, so it's actually one less unit.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else from council? Mr. Solicitor?
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll open it up to members of the public, and why don't we do this? Let's start on this side of the room, the railroad track side, and we'll go to the first row. Is there anybody who would like to get up and speak in the first row? How about the second row? Second row. Sir, come on up, state your name and your address, please.
Do we have to sign in?
Yeah, we should have
You want him to sign in?
And can you please sign in also? Should be a sign-in sheet on the podium itself.
Just right up to the podium, sir. All right. Thank you.
My name's Dave Moyer. I've been living on Arch Street for the last 25 years, an Emmaus resident since I'm born. I have a few major concerns. The major one is with traffic, and I know it's not a traffic issue tonight, but what we brought up earlier about the 2 access points really concerns me. Living on Arch Street, we do have a cul-de-sac that doesn't lead into the old junkyard yet, which was Schmelz's at one time. However, I have deep concerns about putting 50 or so odd homes up there where your one true access to get out of that whole area now with the development that I'm in, plus the residents of DeLong Street and Tillman Street, and those areas have gotten more crowded besides the Arch Street development in the recent years of how are we going to get out of that neighborhood with one access point of Pennsylvania Avenue from DeLong Street. That really is of grave concern to me, traffic-wise. And the safety issues of our development, Arch Street, the cul-de-sac, is mainly children, young children, families, and it has been since I moved in, although my kids are gone from the neighborhood. But it's mainly young children playing in those areas, and through traffic would really throw, I think, a bad noose into that. Other concern is I would like to know more about this conservancy part of this parcel of land that we're talking about, coming down from, I believe, the railroad tracks into the development. The new development, proposed development, is, you said something like 1.7 acres of the total plan? I'm not sure. That's what we're talking about tonight, rearranging that, rezoning that, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And that authority comes from our council here, is that correct? To give permission to do that?
What happens is when this reaches the phase where there's a plan that shows the development in more detail,
Right.
and it gets fully engineered in terms of how the stormwater is handled, how the streets are handled, the access, those types of things, those are going to be issues that would get nailed down in accordance with the ordinances that the borough already has in place. And the borough has essentially 3 ordinances that are significant in terms of how a development gets built. There's the zoning ordinance, and that talks about setbacks and different types of uses and things like that. There is a subdivision and land development ordinance, which we call the SALDO. The SALDO basically tells you how you build the development. And then there is a stormwater management ordinance that helps to deal with stormwater runoff and things like that that are created by a project. So what happens is the borough will look at the details of a plan in accordance with the ordinances that exist. The initial review will be by the Planning Commission at another meeting, and there can be input on all of the issues that you're raising. The access issue is typically a subdivision and land development issue. Those access questions are covered in that ordinance, and those will be reviewed in front of the Planning Commission, assuming that there's a plan. The sense that I have from the hearing is that there will be a plan for this property, regardless of whether or not this zoning amendment is passed, because there are other things that the applicant here can do with the land. So those types of issues will get addressed at that type of proceeding.
I mean, that's sort of a scare tactic, the way I see it. Okay, you don't approve this, and therefore you get more, of what you don't want. That kind of bothers me that whole point was brought up, to tell you the truth. But as far as stormwaters go, I'm sure you have your plans for, and I saw the plans for drainage and so forth, which abut most of the Arch Street area homes, and separating those homes with what would be drainage ponds, in essence. And from there, where the water goes, I'm sure that you have plans for that to, lead into Emmaus's.
Yeah, let's be clear. What happens with stormwater is the developer's engineer will put that type of a plan together. The township or the borough's engineer will review those against the borough ordinances and against other applicable laws. And then the stormwater management is further reviewed by the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission and also the Lehigh Valley Conservation District, which is Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's representative locally. And there's a fairly stringent permitting process for how you handle the stormwater. And today, most stormwater is infiltrated into the ground on the site. It's not intended to leave the property, but to be infiltrated. So you construct these facilities to actually have the water go back into the ground, unlike the old days where it was taken to a collector or put into a stream or something like that.
Well, on personal experience, I live on the northern side of Arch Street, abut the old Schmelz's car
Okay,
facility.
sir, we need to move it along. So go ahead. But let's.
Well, I think this is an important issue. When they decided to dump, 50 million tons of dirt up there on the, I guess you would call it the west end of the dump, that led water into our properties like you wouldn't believe. And nothing was ever really handled on that issue.
Well, sir, it's the obligation of a developer in this process, as I've just indicated to you,
Okay.
to infiltrate that water into the ground on the site. What somebody else might have dumped years ago, I don't know, but I can tell you that as part of the land review process today, and as part of the permitting process through the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, as well as the EPA, which handles what are called NPDES permits, the procedure for handling stormwater today is to infiltrate it into the ground. That's the procedure. That's how the plan will be reviewed. Those are the standards. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes you'll find that development actually helps to resolve some stormwater problems because of the new requirements for infiltration. And that is something that is thoroughly reviewed in the stormwater process.
All right, and then my last, so I'm sure we have some common things, my neighbors and myself. The laws or environmental laws for letting that land set for so many years, does anybody in the room know what they are because of the car acids and oils and everything that were in that dump at one time, as far as new construction goes?
I don't know, because I don't know what's on the site. That'll be an issue that the developer,
I mean, it's been gone now for a good 15, 18 years, I believe.
I can tell you that the purchaser did environmental studies prior to the acquisition of the property, and the property came back